Hare Krishna. General pranams to everyone on the call here. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We're reading from Canto 3, chapter 20, text 35. Yava kachitvam abale dishtya sadan sandarshanam tava utsano shikshamananam kanduka kridaya manaha. Yava kachitvam abale Drishti sandarshanam tava utsano siksamananam kanduka kridaya manaha. Let me make sure that everybody can see the text as well. We're on text 35. Yes. So reading it once more. Yava kachit tvam abale Dishya sandarshanam tava utsano sikshamananam kanduka kridaya manaha. Synonyms: ya, whosoever; va, or; kachit, anyone; tvam, you; abale, O beautiful girl; dishtya, by fortune; sandarshanam, seeing; tava, of you; utsunosi, you agitate; ikshamananam, of the onlookers; kanduka, with a ball; kridaya, by play; manaha, the mind. Translation: whoever you may be, O beautiful girl, we're fortunate in being able to see you. While playing with a ball, you have agitated the minds of all onlookers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. A purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Demons arrange many kinds of performances to see the glaring beauty of a beautiful woman. Here it is stated that they saw the girl playing with a ball. Sometimes the demoniac arrange for so-called sports like tennis with the opposite sex. The purpose of such sporting is to see the bodily construction of the beautiful girl and enjoy a subtle sex mentality. This demoniac sex mentality of material enjoyment is sometimes encouraged by so-called yogis who encourage the public to enjoy sex life in different varieties and at the same time advertise that if one meditates on a certain manufactured mantra, one can become God within 6 months. The public wants to be cheated, and Krishna therefore creates such cheaters to misrepresent and delude. The so-called yogis are actually enjoyers of the world, garbed as yogis. Bhagavad Gita, however, recommends that if one wants to enjoy life, then it cannot be with these gross senses. A patient is advised by the experienced physician to refrain from ordinary enjoyment while in the diseased condition. A diseased person cannot enjoy anything. He has to restrain his enjoyment in order to get rid of the disease. Similarly, our material condition is a diseased condition. If one wants to enjoy real sense enjoyment, then one must get free from the entanglement of material existence. In spiritual life, we can enjoy sense enjoyment which has no end. The difference between material and spiritual enjoyment is that material enjoyment is limited. Even if a man engages in material sex enjoyment, he cannot enjoy it for long. But when the sex enjoyment is given up, then one can enter spiritual life, which is unending. In the Bhagavatam 5.5.1, it is stated that the Brahma Saukya, spiritual happiness is ananta, unending. Foolish creatures are enamored by the beauty of matter and think that the enjoyment it offers is real, but actually that is not real enjoyment. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Dhananjana Shalakya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. A very good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us today. And in advance, I'd like to wish each and every one of you and your families a very, very blessed and happy Janmashtami. So today we're reading a very important verse, a very heavy verse. This can be a make or break for most of us in the advancement and the progress of our spiritual advancement in our lives. So it is to be regarded very seriously, and obviously I'm not going to be able to do any justice in 30 minutes or an hour even. This is something that takes a lot of contemplation, a lot of meditation, a lot of introspection, realization, and then practice to be able to get through, even get an understanding and then get through, this journey of spiritual advancement. This is one of the greatest hurdles that we see, which is the agitation of the mind through, sexual triggers. And therefore, it is something that we have to pay very close attention to and take it very seriously. It is our ultimate fight with Maya. So I thought the title for this discussion today is really around the key operative word, which is Utsunosi, or the agitation of the mind. And I thought it went really well with the deluge that we face. And so that's why I call it the tsunami of the mind, because the mind goes into a complete spin and we're so overwhelmed when we are subject to this, to these triggers and, and being put in a situation inadvertently or, intentionally. We do come across these situations in life as we get older. So yes, a little brief context here. The reading from the third canto, the 20th chapter, text number 35 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's titled, the discussions between Maitreya and Vidura. So Maitreya Muni is continuing to answer Vidura's thoughtful questions on the topic of creation, which leads to more controversial topics that are related, that are even more relevant, I should say, in terms of this age and our spiritual advancement. And that is the topic of sense gratification. So here's briefly what led up to this. I mean, you might wonder, how come, Maitreya and Vidura are discussing topics like this? We should be only talking about the pastimes about Krishna, or they would be talking about pastimes of Krishna and so on. But as a part of creation, the sages in Naimisharanya were requesting Sutta Goswami as to what he heard from Sukadev Goswami, as he was explaining, the whole genesis of creation itself. And after Lord Brahma took over as the secondary creator, what did he do? And as we read in the previous chapter, it was all about how the Lord in the Varaha incarnation retrieved and restored and rescued the Mother Earth, and from Hiranyaksha, and restored its position, um, the Earth's position. And so the sages of Naimisharanya were requesting Sudha Goswami to explain. So what else did Vidura ask of Maitreya, and what did Lord Brahma do, after the earth was restored, and after he created the Prajapatis, the progenitors, what happened after that? How did creation came to be, right, or come to be? And then also, what were the various um, experiences that Lord Brahma had in the process of the secondary creation, which then, Maitreya Muni is explaining to Vidura that Lord Brahma not only started by creating, the five, the modes of ignorance, the five different modes that were explained so nicely by Mataji yesterday, and they're also mentioned in our same chapter, and that was to do with the Tamishra, the Andha Tamishra, and the Tamas Moha and Mahamoha, if I remember correctly. And so, in disgust, Lord Brahma discarded that body. He felt so impure, and he basically gave up his body, his material body at that point in time, and that then from that came these yakshas and rakshasas who were so infuriated by uh, the sexual inclinations and the mode of ignorance, the modes of ignorance that are in complete darkness. Basically, they are dark thoughts leading people, normally to dark activities, mostly sexually based. And therefore, these yakshas and rakshasas were getting so frustrated that in total desperation, they were going after Lord Brahma himself, the creator, the secondary creator that we're talking about. And Lord Brahma was then initially he thought it was just a joke, but then he realized, man, this is serious. It's getting too much. And so he ran to Krishna. He ran to Krishna. And, so Krishna tells him, hey, just give up that body. So he gives up that body as well, and he creates daytime from which the demigods appear, and then he gives up that body as well, and it takes the form of twilight, which is where we are right now, where that twilight, that form of Lord Brahma as twilight, is mistaken by these demoniac personalities who look at this form and think it is a beautiful woman, and so they are trying to get after her and trying to win her over, and that's where we are right now. So it's an exciting verse, and it's also a very serious and deep verse. So let's pay close attention and see if we can internalize some of these, introspect and internalize some of the messages during this discussion. And we can have an open discussion, time permitting, and as your schedule permits. I know most of you are busy with Janmashtami preparations. There's a lot of services in the temple. The whole week has been a long week for all of us, or most of us, and we continue to spend time very joyfully in terms of welcoming the Lord, the advent of His appearance. All right, so Utsunosi, that's the key operative word. Utsunosi, as Srila Prabhupada translates it, is to agitate, to agitate. And agitate what? The mind. Now, the mind behaves very irrationally when agitated, right? So it reminds me of my granddaughter, the youngest one, even sitting in her high chair, watching her mother prepare her food, and she's not able to control herself. Right? She's screaming out loudly. She's waving her hands, waving her feet and legs, and trying to get her mother's attention. Anything so that she can get some food in her mouth. And her mother's watching all this as she is preparing, and she's hurrying. She's trying to get the food out as quickly as possible. She knows the little one is waiting for the food and is hungry. So that's the mother's mood at that point in time, right? And then sure enough, she brings the food to the little child's mouth, and the food is still hot. It's just hot off the stove, but it's not cool enough for the little one to be able to consume it comfortably. So she cries out even louder, right? So this is the agitation of the mind as the toddler is waiting for the food, watching the food being prepared. She recognizes, the mother's in the kitchen, the high chair is in the kitchen. She's sitting in the high chair facing her mother, watching all of this drama going on. And watching this drama as an onlooker, I, I, I see a loving exchange between the child and the mother. Okay. Now, I'm going to take this completely out of context and in a different context for, in a much more serious way. For an onlooker that is witnessing a sexual object or even, something that is just provocative without any explicit display, it is still a trigger. It is a trigger for irrational agitation of the mind. In other words, the mind goes berserk, right? It's in a total state of Utsunosi. So researchers in general have been working on, trying to figure out, what really is the cause for some of these things, and it's a complex interaction of how physical impulses are translated into chemical reactions, which lead to further physical reactions in the human body and mind. So they find that there is a strong correlation between sexual libido and the intensity of the mind, or intensity of the material response by the mind. It turns out that stronger the trigger, stronger the trigger, greater the activity in the brain, causing sexual libido to increase at a rapid rate in a very short span of even a few minutes. So, in other words, we get trigger happy. The mind is involuntarily jumping into that mode where it is responding to stimulus, right? And it's like the Pavlovian response that Mataji was talking about. She gave the example of how the Pavlov subjected the dog to a response to a tinkling of the bell with food. So every time the bell rang, the dog salivated and was expecting food. Similarly, we have triggers in life, different kinds of triggers that, during the course of the day, we are exposed to these kinds of triggers one way or the other, thanks to Maya, thanks to the external energy that is acting on us. And as we are in different modes during the whole day, we are experiencing various reactions. And that's in this case, it's the programmatic, or it's the programmed animalistic instinct that even humans have inherited intrinsically. So, as we also know, male elephants, for instance, to get their tusks, poachers attract the male elephant by having a cow elephant nearby, right? And so it's led into a trap, and once it falls into the trap, it can't get out, and so the poachers have their way, unfortunately. So that is the kind of animalistic instinct that we all, we've inherited that one way or the other. I don't know if we should be blaming Brahma for that or what, but we are all subject to it one way or the other. We are. And guess what? It's not the size of the genitals that is the predominant sex organ here, but more so a function of our mind. So the scientific community is concluding that the brain indeed is the most fundamental sex organ, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman. So in capitalistic America, capitalistic America, the big pharma companies are, putting in their investments, where they see huge amounts of returns, which is what is happening, where companies are exploiting this fact that to increase sexual libido, we need to increase or agitate the brain. By agitating the brain and the mind, they're able to, you know, provide or promote outcomes for the common man and the common woman, saying that, hey, this is going to increase your sexual libido, and they give it, they first make it sound very dire, and they give it names, fancy names like erectile dysfunction, or, a lack of self-esteem. They make it sort of scary, and they instill that fear in the person, and also, try to promise that, hey, if you do this, if you take our drugs, you're going to feel so much better, you're going to feel so much stronger, younger, you're going to be able to enjoy for a longer time. So the propaganda is so hypocritical, because what we're supposed to stay away from. In fact, if you ask me, it's a blessing in disguise if a person is not able to experience, that kind of sexual libido. But then the pharma companies are turning that around and using that to their advantage, and in turn leading the common man to believe that it is not right not to have sexual libido, and that the person should consider that seriously, take drugs to be able to do, perform sex on a daily basis, or for a much more longer time, and so on and so on and so forth. So it's actually very, very hypocritical there. So our Shastras, on the other hand, tell us that the real illness is not about not being able to perform sexually, but instead restraining and regulating our sexual interactions, and restraining it and keeping sexual activity only to the extent of procreation, and not just procreation, but going a step further, procreation of Krishna conscious offspring. So there is a very interesting verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, in Canto 1, Chapter 2, and I'll read it out. We read about it, where it is said, Kamasya nendriya priti labho jiveta yavata. I'll say it again. Kamasya nendriya priti labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jignasa nartho yas cheha karmadi. Okay, so the translation is that life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. Life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life only for self-preservation. Since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth, nothing else should be the goal of one's works. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, and I'll read it out. The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires in sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. And then he goes on to say, but the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. In other words, you're not revolving your entire life around sense gratification, making money for sense gratification, and that's very much true in what we see around us in terms of how companies are promoting products, how people are going after these goals of making more and doing more under this whole illusion of, hey, this is my ambition, I want to be able to achieve and be an overachiever. But ultimately it boils down to be able to use or utilize what is then received from these endeavors in senseless sense gratification. All right, so Prabhupada says, but the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as is required for self-preservation and not for sense gratification. Because the body is made of senses which also require a certain amount of satisfaction, there are regulative directions for satisfaction of such senses. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment, which is what is happening. We don't know where to draw the line. Maya is so strong, and we have baggage that we carry, from previous lives. So all of these things are coming together in such a form that we are being pushed towards actually engaging in something or in activities that we shouldn't be. There is no regulation. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage or the combination of a man with a woman is necessary for progeny, but it is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is propaganda for family planning. But foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is search after the absolute truth. So, in other words, we don't need any, artificial means like contraceptives and things like that. But by engaging our senses in inquiring about the absolute truth and engaging in activities, in service to the Lord, we can very easily overcome that. And Prabhupada says, seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth, the absolute truth in this case. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth. And that sort of engagement will make one happy, because he will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. Beautifully explained by Srila Prabhupada. So we need to constantly remind ourselves about our purpose in life, that it is not about mating and indulging in sense gratification in the least. The sex is to be regarded seriously for procreation only. And as devotees, like I said, this should be for procreation of Krishna conscious offspring. Now we also see yoga clubs over even the last several decades that have been here in the US. It's just been, a very rapid rise in the number of yoga clubs around the country and around the world. Okay, so people recognize the benefits of yoga, but how they use it is completely, it mystifies me as to why people are not trying to really, are not trying hard enough to understand what the real purpose of yoga is. They're not looking at yoga as connecting with the Lord or the union with the Lord, but instead they're looking at ways to improve their physical being and their physical capabilities and abilities to be able to have a better sex life. And that's what it boils down to. So it's not for a clean mind and a clean body, but more for an active sex life. And a few realizations again, we see that there are, impressions that are formed. It just takes a few seconds to get distracted, even for the strictest yogi, for that matter, right? Impressions of erotic nature or provocative sexual objects, as these are recorded in the darkest portions of our brains. We may not be aware, or we may not be conscious that, this is happening, but it is happening. Everything is being recorded in our brains. And unfortunately, at the most inopportune moment, these, impressions come to the surface through the mechanism of triggers, right? And when I say triggers, these are events or, circumstances that happen, which Maya so blissfully or easily presents it to us, or presents them to us. And we find ourselves in a situation where, these triggers are actually bringing out or bringing to the surface these impressions that have been recorded. And it could be just a subtle gesture from the opposite sex, for that matter, right? or it could be a person of the opposite sex in a very suggestive outfit. It could be any of these, and even a simple and non-consequential interaction, for instance, between a man and a woman, even for a moment, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes can trigger the ugly head of sexual inclination. It's like when my kids were little, we would take them to the mall for getting some of their energy spent on in video games and stuff like that. This was before we got into Krishna consciousness here. But I remember there was one piece of attraction which was a physical, I won't say model, but a contraption where you had all these holes and these moles would pop up, and you were given a hammer. The child would be given a hammer, and the child would have to pop these moles as fast as they appeared. As they pop their ugly heads up, boom, you smack them on their heads and they go down. And the winner really gets the maximum number of moles smacked on their heads. And similarly, in our day-to-day lives, these sexual triggers or these triggers happen and pop their ugly heads, as I can visualize them, at the most inopportune moments, and cause a lot of agitation in the mind, a lot of Utsunosi. And it is up to us to be able to recognize that and, smack them on their heads, smack all these triggers right away, nip it in the bud. And if you think in this age of Kali, the visual response and the visual triggers are so strong, even in the Satya Yoga, just by hearing, not even seeing, right? Just by hearing itself. Vishwamitra is a great example where he was in years and years of austerities, and he was performing penances, and just by hearing the tinkle of the anklets coming off of Menaka, he completely lost it. It broke his penance, and there he was indulging in carnal pleasures. Carnal pleasures. Great Vishwamitra is a very elevated stage. And he was taken completely away. He was swept off the floor by Menaka, and he indulged in carnal pleasures for several years with Menaka before realizing what happened. It didn't even strike him. I mean, we're not talking about a few moments, where we think, hey, we did something wrong or we're about to do something. No, this is indulging in these kinds of, material pleasures over many, many years. And then Vishwamitra really woke up and said, oops, what did I do? And Menaka, what did you do? So he got angry, and and he actually turned Menaka into stone. So these things happened, and it's Maya's, or the external energy of the Lord, is so strong, and it has been happening time immemorial. And imagine what Maya can do to an ordinary human being like us. Great personalities have come and gone, and their lives have been completely destroyed. Even with Lord Brahma, who is the seat of knowledge, he's the secondary creator of everything that we see in this material universe. But even he was subject to sexual inclinations with his own daughter. I mean, talk about that. I mean, it's just not just a sexual interaction, but being in a situation where he is viewing his own daughter. It's incestuous, just to think about it. So even for Lord Brahma, with all that knowledge, he was subject to that. So what to speak of, human beings like us? We're just ordinary, insignificant. For the external energy, for Maya Devi, it is just nothing. It is just like less than child's play, right? And then we see so many personalities, even in the present, that have their entire lives, their careers destroyed as a result of, sexual interactions, inappropriate sexual interactions with their staff or with, people of the opposite sex and so on, out, committing adultery and so on. I mean, so it's really sad, but it is also very, very, very serious, in terms of how the consequences can be so dire. In fact, the other day there was a lot of commotion on our street, um, where we had several cop cars with flashing red lights. We had an ambulance, actually a couple of ambulances, and they blocked up the street. So Richard and I were rushing out to the temple, and we couldn't go down our street, which we normally do. We had to, go around, and from the other side, we could see that the cop cars had blocked out that side as well. And it turned out that one of our neighbors basically had a divorce, and he came back to live with his ex-wife, but he also brought his current wife with him, and they were all living in the same house, and it was totally bizarre that a situation like this where the person is living with his ex-wife and he has his wife also, and they're all living in the same house, and they get into an argument, and he pulls out a knife and he stabs her multiple times and kills her. And the granddaughter that is watching all of this comes out running onto the street, crying out for help. I mean, she's scarred for life. So think about this. This is something that they wouldn't have thought of, the hour before all of that had happened. Such irrational responses that a human being can actually carry out. And the Bhagavad Gita talks about this all the time, right? About how these inclinations can turn into an obsession, which then completely delude the mind and cause us to behave irrationally through anger. So I know we spoke a little bit, and the clock is moving here. I have a few minutes left, but let's see if we have any discussion around, so what can be the cure? How do we do this? Because it is so difficult to overcome Maya, and we're so tiny and inconsequential, right? So, what is the cure, and how do we control the mind? Controlling the mind is super difficult. I mean, even Arjuna was telling Krishna, or told Krishna, that Krishna, how do I do this? It's just super difficult to control the mind. So, even for the best of humans, controlling the mind is super difficult. Now, we can control our mind through yoga exercises, meditating in complex orientations and contortions of the body, or even performing severe austerities. But then all of that is useless, because the moment you stop that meditation, or the moment you stop that yogic pose, for instance, Maya is there to take us. We're immediately, in less than 1/20th of a second, as the scriptures tell us, we are transported to the material platform. We're back in this so-called material reality, and we're subject to all the modes. So even knowledge alone, as we heard from Lord Brahma's example, is useless, because it does not give us the strength to overcome the external energy. And the external energy is not just external energy, the external energy of the Lord himself. So it is very powerful. Now in contrast, look at Haridas Thakur as to how he dealt with the situation when, evil intentioned folks sent this beautiful prostitute to him. He spent his time instead engaging his senses and his mind, his body, in chanting the holy names day after day after day. And after the third day, even Maya, personified in the form of Chaya Devi, was standing with folded arms. And so Haridas Thakur sets a fantastic example for us, a living example. And this is not too far behind. I mean, you look at it, it was only around 400, 500 years ago, right? So it still applies to us even in this day and age. In fact, more so now, because Kali Yuga is growing worse and worse and worse day by day. So chanting, as we know, for sure is a great way to calm and refocus our mind. Now, we may not be at the level of Haridas Thakur, right? So we may fail the first time, it still doesn't work. We may still, get ourselves into trouble. We may, try chanting the second time, not strong enough. We may fail again, be subject to Maya again. And it may happen several times even. But as Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 8, says, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena Chetasa Nanya Gamina Paramam Purusham Divyam Yati Parthanu Chintayana. So says it is through practice and through exclusive remembrance of Krishna, right? By meditating upon the absolute truth, one can gradually overcome and become an expert in terms of overcoming, the forces of this external energy or Maya. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, and I'll read that to you, we must remember that it is not the actions that we're performing with our body, but pay close attention to this, but where we are placing our mind that will shape our future. I mean, so deep, so profound, and so impactful. I mean, if you think about it, Prabhupada is saying we must remember that it's not the actions that we're performing with the body, but where we are placing our mind that will shape our future. So while performing our worldly duties, if we attach our mind to God, who is all pure, our mind will also get purified. I mean, that's such a valuable lesson. Where we're placing our mind shapes our future. I mean, that's so deep. So it goes back to what scientists are finding out and concluding that the brain is the biggest sexual organ or the sex organ in this human body. But what they're doing with this profound knowledge and what they really should be doing, it's a huge contrast. And that's where the hypocrisy that I was talking about, instead of helping the common man in restraining those senses towards sex or sex life, they're in fact encouraging even the normal human being to perform more and better in their sex life. So that it's just going to be a constant. If you look at it, the scriptures tell us we're just binding ourselves. Every time we do that, we're binding ourselves to this material world so that we come back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. I mean, it is ridiculous knowing what we know, and we're still being, subject to these kinds of situations where we're not able to help ourselves. And in fact, marketing is throwing ads at us every time you turn on the TV. Why don't you take Viagra? Why don't you take this, that, to promote our sex life, which is not the right thing to do. So that creates a tsunami of the mind. So basically, the scientists are urging us, or the pharma companies are urging us to take these drugs that not only increase our sexual libido, but also intensify the tsunami of Utsunosi, of the mind. So that's a sure shot to bring us back lifetime after lifetime to this material world. We're literally signing away and securing our our attachment to this material world in whatever form, whether it's the human form, the animal form, whatever it is, but we are coming back for sure, right? When we engage like that. So instead, tempering our chanting with the association of devotees and stirring in devotional service is a lasting recipe to beat Maya. These are the ingredients that we need, right? So we have chanting, we have the association of devotees, and we use all of this to engage in devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada has provided us with the facilities and the faculties to be able to, actually engage in purposeful devotional service and devotional activities in the association of devotees. So our chanting gets better, our association with like-minded devotees gets stronger, and devotional service that we engage in then becomes more, so Krishna reciprocates with the devotional service. So we're putting more and more devotion into those devotional activities. It's no longer just a chore. It's no longer a complaint about, why do I have to do this? Why does the management have to tell me to work so hard and do this and do that? But I'm doing it because I want to do it for the pleasure of Krishna. So that intensity of devotion starts to build up. I would also say recognize the triggers, because even as we're performing devotional activities, it's only normal, right? It's only normal. Like I said, Maya is acting on us all the time, all the time. Maya is not saying, hey, I'm going to take a break. Or Maya is not going to say, okay, I'm going to let you be, do your thing. I'm just going to. No, Maya has been given a service by the Lord to delude the common human being. And therefore, she's been doing this for ages and ages and ages, and she's doing a great job. She's extremely good. She's completely empowered by the Lord. So we don't even have to think twice. Is Maya doing her job? Is she giving me a break? Is she on a break? Is she taking a vacation? Is she enjoying herself? No, she's subjecting us to this false sense of enjoyment. And if we fall in that trap or fall into that trap, that's it. We're like that elephant, the male elephant that's completely trapped in, not only a deep, 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 deep hole, but also with spikes sticking out into our bodies from the bottom up. Painful, absolutely painful. That's what we're doing. We're actually killing our spiritual advancement. We're actually killing our spiritual progress. So why would we want to shoot ourselves in the foot, right? And so we want to look at ways, we want to invest in our consciousness to be able to perform our devotional activities with love. Because as our love for Krishna grows and as our devotion grows towards Krishna, Krishna is not sitting there, like some stone. No, instead, he is constantly reciprocating. He wants us back. He loves us so much that he wants us back. So he gives us signs, he gives us the encouragement, he gives us ways in which he can, we can come back to him. So we need to recognize those triggers in the first place. So that's the endeavor that we need to go through. The moment we recognize what are the things that, actually cause me to be distracted. Is it the TV? Is it this or is it that? These are the triggers that we need to make a mental note of in our minds and be conscious of that and say, hey, these are things I want to try and avoid. So the moment we see it, even in its earliest stages, right? If it's just a slight indication that that trigger is about to happen, shut it out completely. Just shut it out completely and say, no, this is not the time, and engage in devotion service. I think what comes to my mind is His Holiness BBG Maharaj many, 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 many years ago when he was here in April. He was giving us a beautiful lecture again, from the Bhagavatam after an ecstatic kirtan. And he was telling us about how the common man is working so hard and endeavoring so hard, is frothing from the sides of his mouth, going beyond his capacity, all for what? So that he can make money, so that he can not only feed his family, but also feed his sex life. So BBG Maharaj was saying in response to that, when the tough get going, or when the going gets tough, the tough get going. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And what he was referring to was that when we are subject or put in such situations, we should be chanting even harder. We should be chanting even harder and crying out to the Lord for his help, for his shelter, so that we can be taken away from that situation. Confiding in the sadhu, I mean, that is another important one. I recall one of my dear God brothers telling me, I stand naked in front of my spiritual master. Now, that doesn't mean he's physically naked in front of his spiritual master, but in other words, saying that we need to be transparent with our spiritual master. That's a great way to engage with our spiritual master. gain from his faith, gain from his spiritual experiences, gain from his, knowledge and his love and affection that he can give us, and as a spiritual master to the disciple. And that's the relationship, how we strengthen our relationship with our spiritual master as well. To be able to be transparent and uh, beg for advice and counsel and say, how can I overcome this? I remember having a conversation with my spiritual master, and his advice was, it pales in comparison. These were his words. It pales in comparison, in terms of being able to devote ourselves to, the Lord. When we engage actively, and that's why Krishna consciousness is not a passive practice. Krishna consciousness is all about engaging in active service to the Lord. And that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness. It is not something that is, done in a very, what is the term that I'm looking for, which is inert. It is not passive. It is not sitting in one corner of the room. No, it is about engaging in devotional service, engaging in the service of the Lord in a way that, your loving exchange grows every time, every single time we engage with the Lord. And the Lord is reciprocating. So it's an active exchange between us and the Lord. And that's the beauty of it. And Krishna says even in chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita 10:10, especially or specifically, where he says, Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Yogam Tam Yena Mam Upayantute. So he says, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mam Upayantute. So just by engaging in devotional service, in loving devotional service, I will give you the knowledge by which you can attain me, by which you can come to me. So there's several verses throughout, the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other scriptures where Krishna is saying, you can easily attain me. You can easily attain me just by remembering me. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paripashite tasyaham sulabhapata nitya yuktasya yogina. That's just simply by remembering me, Krishna says, you can attain me. You can cross over this material existence. You can cross over this, you can overcome this material energy. So in conclusion, please know that these are personal realizations that are coming from an arduous journey of purification of the mind. I understand that this is a journey. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying that these realizations are coming from a state of, hey, I've done it, been there, done that, I've achieved it, and now I'm giving it to you. No, this is purification for me, even as I'm speaking about it, even now, right now. And my faith has to be strong, so Krishna will eventually help me transcend this material conception. And it's a journey. It will continue, chipping away little by little by little by little by little. I have to inculcate and I have to maintain that faith that eventually I will get to a state of purity that would be pleasing to Krishna, and that would help me overcome, the material influences in a way that they are not distracting anymore, and I don't have any such triggers. So with that, we are at time. It's 8:30. So if you have any questions, if there's any discussion, let's do that for a couple of minutes and then hand it back to Lakshmikant Prabhu, who can then conclude the call. And thank you again, for bearing with me as I spoke to this very difficult but very important topic, very serious topic.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, then with Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Besides Lakshmikant Prabhu, I'm the only one on the call, so I think I will feel free to go first. thank you for giving such an amazing class on a day that you know, on a day where it's so so important. It's like preparing us for Janmashtami. This topic actually, because the verse and the purport are also so amazing. Like the purport, Prabhupada is saying, like what you were saying, um, how how we can, it's when we get the taste for Krishna, then this lower taste goes away, and this lower taste goes away when we get the taste for Krishna. And it's such an amazing verse. Like, I was just reading it, and yeah, the point I wanted to what I observed was how Prabhupada talks about tennis and sports, and how so many of these are kind of covered sense gratification, to see the body of a woman move in different ways. And recently the Paris Olympics happened, right? And it's like so much like that. You see, like the Olympics is not just about sports, but about just uh, lust for the material body. Just trying to display the body, and you explained it so nicely. You gave such nice examples of things that are even happening in our neighborhood, where it's that's the driving factor behind all these things. And the devotees are, and Krishna are very sharp. They can actually see that, no, this is what's the underlying principle behind this. This is not just about the Olympics. This is the reason why it's such a crowd attractor and big thing, is because they are, it's the same material pleasure that they're chasing. But if we have Krishna, then that temporary pleasure becomes very minute in comparison. And yeah, so that's that's just a few thoughts, Prabhu.
Very, very true, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's a very difficult journey. I mean, it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
Every day is a challenge. Every moment is a challenge sometimes. But that's the reality. That's the ground reality we're faced with, and so fortunate for us. I mean, we're so very, very, very fortunate because we're given the tools and we're given the facilities to be able to actually practice in this playground, right?
Yes.
Um, the war is going on, but and battles are being won and lost in the meantime. But Krishna is not standing there with a stick saying, you lost this battle, you're done, I'm done with you. He's like that parent, that loving parent. No matter how many times we fall, he's there to, pick us up and say, okay, try walking again.
Yes.
And he's giving us all of these various tools to be able to strengthen our faith in him and improve the quality of our devotional service. So we should be extremely, extremely grateful, to our spiritual master and to Krishna, as to and Srila Prabhupada to bring this, to make this all accessible. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have read the Bhagavatam.
Yes.
I tried reading different versions of the Bhagavad Gita even, and it was going over my head most of the time until I started reading Prabhupada's books. So this is really something that I'm really, really grateful, and I think we should all be very grateful to Prabhupada for what he's done to for us.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Prabhu. Thanks again, and
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, your examples and analysis was actually very deep. So thank you for that, Prabhu. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Trying, we're trying, we're trying.
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
hold
surprised.
hands together and make it. I'm
This
sorry.
this uh this happened in White Eagle, the murder that you described. You like it was
Yes,
in this area.
on
Wow.
Saddlebrook Drive. Yeah, just down the road, 3 houses down the road from where I live.
Wow. Wow. It's like
Yeah,
so close to home.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And within a span of a few minutes, all of this happened. Appears
Wow.
because I had a chat with our community manager after that, and because they weren't giving us the details, and we wanted to know if it was a security incident that we should be concerned
Mhm.
about, especially with
Yes.
kids in and out. and we've never had such things. White Eagle has been a very, very nice subdivision to live in. We've left our doors open. So we wanted to know because times are changing, things are changing. So we
Yes.
wanted to make sure that we were not missing out on something. And then I found out after a little coaxing and probing that this is exactly what had happened, which transpired so quickly in a matter of minutes. And that's it.
Yeah.
Now that person is gone and cannot even come back. And this person, the perpetrator, is behind bars. His life is completely gone. He must have been a successful,
Wow.
exec somewhere. And he's gone. And the little child, the granddaughter, is completely scarred for life. I mean, it's a no-win situation for anybody, for that matter, even for his new wife.
Hmm. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
man, it's
Yes.
disturbing. So, I mean, when we think of these consequences, when we really, start to think, yeah, is it really worth, indulging in these kinds of things, which last only for a few minutes, but then the consequences are very dire and irrevocable. That's the worst part, right? So
Yeah.
they're not only irrational, but also irrevocable to a point that we cannot undo what's been done. Time only moves forward. So that's the seriousness that we need to have. That we have only so much time left. Let's make sure we're doing the right things.
Mm. Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Prabhu, and thank you again for your association. Please,
Thank
please keep
you.
us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna
Thank you.
Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare
Hare Krishna
Krishna.
Prabhu. Please accept humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. Thank
Jai.
you, Prabhu, for a nice class. I was just thinking about, I know you gave multiple different perspective also on like Krishna. It's very easy to go back to him. I mean, he very lovingly helps us. But other way, I was thinking that, I mean, even it's very difficult to overcome the sensual sense gratification, right? So, I mean, that also you stressed, I think, two different sides of it, right? I mean, so I was just thinking, why is it so hard if somebody who turned his face towards the Lord, still very hard to overcome the sense gratification. I know example is there. It's like a drop in the hoof's calf print. I mean calf's hoof print, right? I mean then it's like so easy, but still it looks like it's very difficult, right? It's like ocean. I mean at our stage at least, right? So, but I'm talking about from practicing devotee. I mean, we have seen in many examples in the history also, right? I mean, devotees falling prey to sense gratification activities, and of course, the other side is there. I mean, like for example, you get the example of Haridas Thakur and all, but then it's very hard, right? So, I was just thinking about it. Why is it? Why the Maya Devi makes it so hard, right? So, if you want to, if you can share something.
No, she's Mahadevi. I mean, she's completely empowered by the Lord,
Yeah.
right? So she has all the faculties available to her, to be able to exert the kind of influence that she does. There's no two ways about it. Like I said, she's not thinking, oh, do I want to give Sri Vallabha Das or the Lakshmikant Prabhu or even Gopal Hari Prabhu, a break. No, she doesn't want. She will not spare anybody. Anybody. Prabhupada would pray so hard, and one of the devotees noticing why Prabhupada was praying so hard before the altar, he later disclosed. He said, "I am praying for the Lord's protection." Prabhupada is praying so hard, so sincerely. He was offering obeisances in front of the altar, and for several minutes he didn't get up. So the disciple who was standing in the background later asked Srila Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, what were you praying for?" And this is what Prabhupada said. He was begging for protection. So as long as we're in this material universe, starting from Brahma down, we're all subject to these triggers. And when we give into these triggers, then it's the end of story there, for that particular, it's the battle lost. But the good part is that Krishna is there to pick us up. So that's the faith we need to be. It's not so much about falling down. Even His Holiness Rumpad Swami Maharaj also says all the time, don't invest your time in, oh, this is something that I did wrong. Oh, and, sit back and then you're making it all about yourself. Instead, think about how you can get out of it, your recovery from that. What am I going to do next? Am I going to chant more? Am I going to chant better? Am I going to engage in devotion service? So it's about recovering from the fall that is more important than the fall itself. We tend to beat ourselves up, and when we fall, we're sitting like that. Even if you watch a tennis game, for that matter, you watch Nadal or you watch a Federer, any of these guys, when they lose the point, it's not they're not thinking. They've psychologically they've trained their minds not to dwell on the point that was lost, but in terms of how do I make the next point better. Prabhupada also says when you are chanting and if for some reason your mind gets distracted on one japa, see how you can improve with full consciousness in your next japa. Don't try to figure out, oh, I didn't do my japa right and beat yourself to death. No, that's not the right approach. And that's exactly what we need to continue doing. Go and have that faith that Krishna is there to help us. He's not standing with a stick. Instead, he's standing there to help us get up from the ground and walk with him, walk towards him. That's what we need to focus on. I think it boils down to that. Finally, it's about our faith. It's finally about where we want to go, understanding that purpose and really making a conscious effort in terms of what we want to do to get there, to achieve that goal. In the process, we may fall millions of times. I mean, that's fine. That doesn't make us a failure. We have a failure only when we don't do anything about it. We need to make a difference. And when we make that difference for ourselves, not for the world, again, it's about us and Krishna. If we can make that difference in our own personal life, in our own personal being, and in our own personal exchange with Krishna, then we are the most successful. That's how I look at it, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. I know it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
That's why association is so important. That's why we need to hold hands and pull each other up and have these conversations with Guru Maharaj. Have conversations with your spiritual master to see how you can improve. Yeah. I'm sorry, I went over. I don't know if
No,
you
Prabhu.
wanted
Yeah,
to
no, I
discuss
think.
further, but
Yeah. No, I was thinking it's like somebody. It looks like it is opposing, right? It's not supportive. So Maya is in,
yeah. And
right? It's
first reaction, first impulse is, Krishna, why are you doing this to me? Why is this
yeah,
happening only to me? How can you be so mean? I'm so insignificant on the one hand. On the other hand, you're putting one 2,000-pound weight on my head and telling me to walk with it. How do I do it? I cannot do it. So even that, as we cry out to the Lord and say, Krishna, you only have to help me. I'm messing my life up. But can you please help me? Can you please pay attention to what I'm doing and see if you can correct me? That in itself is enough. Krishna will certainly reciprocate. So even admitting that this is very difficult for me, Krishna, your Maya, your external energy is so strong, I cannot deal with it. Even that in itself, just that realization, openly discussing that with the Lord, that in itself is a huge, huge, huge advance in terms of getting closer to Krishna. Krishna will say, yeah, I can see that, and I'm going to help you. Okay, keep crying like this, baby, and I'll take care of you. So Krishna is there. Definitely, he's there. He's watching. He's definitely watching. It's just that we get frustrated because naturally we're so tiny and insignificant. Yes, I complain. I'll be honest about that. I fight with Krishna sometimes. I am complaining, saying, "Why me? Why me? How come this is happening to me?" But that I also, realize that this is a lot of it. It has to do with our baggage. A lot of it has to do with that karma. A lot of it has to do with the external energy that's constantly acting on us. And we're never only in the mode of goodness or only in the mode of bhakti, right? We're moving from one mode to the other constantly. So when you put all of this together, it's like a very, very compounded, reaction to everything that's happening around us.
thank you, Prabhu.
Don't worry, Prabhu. As Maharaj would say, welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. All right. Anything else, Prabhu?
No, that's all, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
So we can conclude. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya vicha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.